Welcome to the Trampled Underfoot podcast. Your hosts, Mark Lindsay and Eloy. We're live. We're doing this. What's going on?
We're doing it?
Yep.
All right. I have earth shaking news. Some of you may have heard this. Some of you may not have heard this. I don't know if you've heard this or not, but this is important stuff. You need to know this. It was announced on the 21st of November that the Rolling Stones are touring the U.S.
Virtually.
They are going to play 16 cities in the U.S. The Rolling Stones are together again, and they are going to tour. They got 16 concert dates in 16 cities, and it'll kick off April 28th in Houston, and tickets will go on sale to the general public on December 1st. I will bet you will never guess who is sponsoring the tour.
Disney,
No, it's funnier than that.
Joe Biden.
I think almost. I think this is absolutely hilarious. All right. Mick Jagger is 80. Keith Richard is 79.
Geritol.
Close. Keith Richards is 79. Ronnie Wood is 76. Steve Jordan on drums is 66. And Daryl Jones is the youngin of the band, is 61. And I kid you not, the tour is sponsored by AARP,
That's great.
the American Association of Retired Persons. You can't make it up, man. You can't make it. I thought that Linda came in here and she goes, I just heard something funny. And I'm like, what? She told me, and I'm like, okay, no, that's too good. No, that can't be. So I looked it up, and sure as hell, on the AARP website, it is a major announcement. Are you kidding me? No, sir.
That's some crazy stuff, dude. They've been around so long. It's not even. They were old when I was growing up, in my
Yeah,
mind.
same here.
They were
Same
probably in
here.
their 30s or 40s, but to me, they were like, damn, they be old.
Well, that brought about something that it made me think about something over the last few days. And that is, at what point do musicians, actors, I mean, actors are a little bit different. I mean, you have to have somebody to play grandpa. But at what age is it time to just say, you know what, we had a good time. Let's just chill out and relax. At what point is it time for a band or a musician to retire?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if they can do it, good on them.
Well, if they like it.
But I mean, when you're talking about the singer is 80, the lead guitarist is 79, half of the crowd is going to be just sitting there just waiting for one of them to collapse on stage. You got to know that's going to be the mindset. Yeah. It's like, dude,
Yeah.
you need to sit down and relax. You're not jumping Jack Flash anymore.
You're talking about 50 years of rock and rolling.
Oh, yeah, or more. Because, I mean, they were, I don't know when exactly they started as a band or even as solo performers,
Right
but
when the
I
Beatles
was,
in that era.
but so you're looking at 64, 65, something like that. So I was 3, 4 years old. I'm not in the best shape in the world. I'm not completely falling apart, although sometimes it feels like it. But I can't imagine getting up on stage and jumping around like that.
Yeah, but you haven't been doing that. I just swallowed a fly.
Oh, well, you get your protein your way, I'll get mine. But
Um,
true, I haven't been doing that all my life either. But
yeah, you haven't been jumping around.
they haven't been doing it for the last 10 to 15 years either.
Yeah, but they're filthy rich and probably have masseuses that friction their legs and bend their kneecaps and all that stuff.
I just think it's flippin' hilarious that the AARP is sponsoring the Rolling Stones tour. I don't
Yeah,
know,
it
man.
is. It is funny, but
I guess if they can do it, go for it. You know.
I won't be watching.
Well, I won't either. I mean, because their time in the sun is over. I really honestly think that.
I
Uh,
never liked them to begin with, to be honest with you.
I mean, I like some of their music. I think "Gimme Shelter" is one of the better tunes ever made. Um, um, "Jumpin' Jack Flash" is pretty good too, but old timey rock and roll. But I mean, rocking in a rocking chair and rolling on a mobility scooter, that's not what, they had in mind when they invented the term rock and roll. So I don't know. Maybe it's a time to sit down before you fall down.
I mean,
And
nobody else is picking up the banner, so
well, I mean, maybe that's what they think. I don't know, man. Do you think maybe they think, look, nobody's putting out, and they put out a new album, and the tour is to support that album.
Jared Tall in the
That's
morning,
it.
a feet massage in the afternoon.
Doot, 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 doot. Rogaine. Doot, 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 doo, doo.
I'll get in some napping time in the afternoon. Get some coffee ready for me. I
That's
don't know
it.
why I'm singing like cheap jingles. Like, what else
Well,
are they gonna sing about?
I don't know. I mean, well, they've got a new album, so Lord knows they're going to be doing music from that.
I can't remember my teenage rage, so I guess I'll take a walk down the park. I don't know. It's just it's everything has its season,
Yeah,
but the rules depend on many factors. So,
I will
although
agree
in
with
our
that.
mind, what's that?
I will agree with that.
Yeah, although in our mind we think of rock and roll as a youthful endeavor,
Mhm.
we've never been in the position we are right now.
I'm kind of in a weird position because growing up, I always looked at rock and roll as kind of counterculture, in that this is not dad's music. Even though my dad brought home some of it early on, I transitioned from that into bands that he didn't particularly like, didn't really care about.
You're more modern than I
But
thought. You transitioned. Go ahead.
I always thought of the music as being counterculture. This is not the kind of music that your parents would listen to, especially when you bring home Black Sabbath Paranoid and your dad's like, turn that shit down. But it's and Led Zeppelin. I mean, I've told you about Led Zeppelin, all that. Mom had to hear just a couple three chords, and it's a turn that down or put the headphones on, that kind of thing. But it was rebellion against, you know, your parents and the establishment and all this, that, and the other. Well, how counterculture can an 80-year-old be? I mean, I get it. If you can get up there and you can sing Gimme Shelter at 80 years old, then I say go for it. But don't get up there and embarrass yourself.
Give me Centrum multivitamins.
Exactly. Really. See, Jim Dockrell says, There are a lot of rich old farts that makes me wonder why they don't just kick back, relax, and take it easy for the rest of their lives. Yeah. At what point do you decide, you know what? I've got more money than I can count. I've got more homes than I could ever live in. It's time to just focus on a few things here with my family. Of course, we're talking Mick Jagger. I mean, he's got kids that are older than it. He's got grandkids that are older than his current wife. Who am I kidding? Um, yeah, Mick Jagger's family tree. You think yours is a convoluted mess? Oh my God. Um, yeah, there are a lot of them. I mean, Bill Gates. How much more money do you need? It's not me. It's not up to me to judge. But you'd think that as old as he is, he would say, you know what? I I'm happy. I'm satisfied. I did a lot. It's time to get into some philanthropy and spend some of this money where it should be spent.
He does. He does do that.
No, a little bit more and just kind of relax. Get away from Microsoft, let it handle itself. Yeah, you gave birth to that baby. It's time to let it leave the nest. It's time to step away and just, you know,
I mean, I'll throw it at you. Um, when would you say, "Oh, the CNC, it's run its course"? Now, although it's a different discipline,
mhm,
the things we enjoy,
mhm. And that's the big thing.
we do it regardless of I'm a year older today than I was last year. Um, and they don't know any better. Like you do. So we're all in the same boat at one level, although there is differences. Like they have billions of millions of dollars, but um, I like you or Mick Jagger
Hmm.
can't help but since we're walking around and stuff, like
Hmm.
we're um, we might as well do something, and even further than that, we might as well do the things that we want to do. But unlike or unlike us, there's something to be said also. Like, so it's not like we have any power,
Hmm.
like a Bill Gates, maybe, let's say.
Yeah,
There's power that comes with that.
sure.
And it's probably, or so they say, um, an equivalent, because money is money and you can buy stuff, and that's kind of like a
Right.
byproduct and stuff of, but power.
And that's what, yeah, and that's what I mean. I can only speak anecdotally. I can only tell you, you were going to reverse the question on me. When is it time for me to kind of, you know, decide to
I,
step back?
I mean, what do you do? Do you sit in your front porch and then just
No, it
sit there? I
it
mean,
I can tell you because of several career changes. When there's a priority shift, when there's a priority shift is when you can step back and kind of evaluate and say it's time to move on from this. It's no longer the priority to do this anymore. I've done what I can here. I've either done well or I haven't done as well as I thought I could, but it's time to step back and move on from here in another direction. And I've done that several times. I did it with stepped away from a military career, stepped away from a career in casino management, stepped away from a career in real estate. I just decided my priority needs to change and I need to go in a different direction. And let's just take Bill Gates as an example. He has shifted his priorities to a certain point. But I think you hit it when you said the power and the control, because Microsoft is still his baby. And I guess in my position, I would be looking at who do I want to take over? Who do I want to groom to take over while I have a say in who that is? Because if he, falls over tomorrow and assumes room temperature, he's his choice doesn't matter. It's beyond his control. He can't decide who's going to take over. He's in a position now to where he can decide who's going to take over and maybe start grooming them for it and maybe step away from it and go do other things, pursue other interests. Johnny Carson did that with the Tonight Show. When he left the Tonight Show, he stepped away from it. It was Jay Leno's baby. He built it up for 32 years. It was Jay Leno's baby, and he went off and he did other things. And his passion became Africa, the Serengeti Desert, and the whole thing out there. And he started putting his money into, water wells for villages and schools and things of that nature. And that became his priority. And comedy and the show, it just kind of, and you didn't hear anything from him really until he passed. And that was quite a while. That was, about 10 years, I believe. So that's what I'm getting at is, with me anyway, it's a priority shift. When a priority shift happens, I have to step back and self-evaluate and see, is this the direction that I need to keep going, or do I need to change something up and go in another direction? So,
Yeah, I can see that. I can see because, the things that, and life sometimes dictates due to the circumstances of where exactly you shift to.
mhm,
It's not always a voluntary aha type
right.
of moment. Um, if there's one thing that, and there's something to be said about not for any not for any part that we play in it other than we're along for the ride, but there's something to be said about also the wisdom that comes with the reoccurrence of a day after a day, and
Mhm.
the things that you see and figure out that at least work for you.
Yeah.
And then you realize, well, maybe this direction that so there's a little bit of that, but
Well, it does take introspection, and it does take self-examination and self-realization, and a lot of talking with your family. But I heard a quote from somebody, and I really don't remember who it was that said it, and that made me kind of back up and regroup up twice, as a matter of fact, and change my direction. And I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact quote. The guy said, I don't ever want to be on my deathbed with my family around me thinking, damn, I really wish I could have worked harder. Because when you get to that point, all the work that you've done doesn't matter. All the time away from your family does.
I,
You
I
know,
I don't know. It's a complicated thing because this is coming from your understanding as a person that's living.
yeah. But
But there's more ways to look at it than one.
mhm,
Um, not that it would make any, not that it would be any better or worse,
mhm,
because I guess what I'm getting at is that if you think of the trajectory of life, that there's a beginning and an end, and all this stuff in the in between.
yeah.
Um, One way to look at it, and I don't necessarily subscribe to this wholeheartedly, but I know that this exists.
Mhm,
It doesn't freaking matter at some level
yeah.
whether or not you are thinking that or don't think that. I mean, it matters at one level, but at a certain level, the problem is stuff like this that you're talking about implies for anybody curious enough to peer over the fence.
Yeah.
um I guess Zappa
Mhm,
said an interesting thing. So he had a career,
mhm,
um, all this rock and roll and symphony music, and And he did an interview, and he says, "So, how would you like to be remembered?" And as cold and casual as can be, neither negative nor positive, he says, "It doesn't matter."
Yeah.
And um, whether he's right or wrong that it doesn't matter, the implication is that, hey, I'm not going to be around
Yeah.
to say one way or the other anyhow. Um,
Yeah.
and so a person like Frank Zappa
Hmm.
was an incredibly brilliant person.
One of the most complex musical minds in history.
But that's true. Well, but besides that, putting that to the side, his insight into the world by that comment that he made,
Hmm.
and still being that brilliant musician. And because here's the thing, there's the realm of the living
Hmm.
is all we know.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah.
So you might as well get on with it. But um he had the wherewithal,
Hmm.
gifted to him, however you want to look at it, to be able to see beyond that fence, over peering over that fence with the mesh on it,
Hmm.
and say, well, here's the scene. And so he said something very true. He said something very dry,
Hmm.
but very truthful. How the hell is he going to know how he's going to be
Well.
remembered or not? And even if he's remembered as a heel,
Hmm.
what, to quote Hillary Clinton, what difference does it make?
Well, I mean, the only thing you can hope for is that you haven't done anything that's going to humiliate or discredit your family or your loved ones. You know how I'm remembered in the great abstract doesn't really matter, as long as how I'm remembered doesn't affect the people I leave behind during their lifetimes.
No, but that only
Then I'm
matters.
okay.
That only to press on that. That only matters to you in your brain, according to the knowledge you've picked up
Right.
and experienced. But beyond,
But it also matters to them
no, no,
because
no,
they're going to have to live with those ramifications.
yeah. But even that consideration
Hmm.
would be irrelevant.
Not to me.
No,
It's
it would be
important to me. Well, it
right.
would be at the time, yes, obviously, because I wouldn't be able to put together a thought. I'd be dead. But you get my
Right.
point.
Yeah.
You know, it's part of that overall theme of I know that my actions, my deeds, and to some extent my words affect more than just me. It affects the people around me. So I have to be cognizant of that when I say or do something. You know, to not be cognizant of that is just to me selfish.
But it also begs the question whether selfish. So we have. I guess we'll stick with the Zappa, because I think it encompasses what I'm trying to say best. Even though he understands, he gets on with it and produces music and does the things that he does. Um, but yet he has this understanding and whatnot, this and that, and this idea that you're mentioning. I guess it leads to something to the effect of to try to do no harm,
Hmm.
especially to your loved ones and so on.
Sure.
Um, it's really the best we can. So that kind of also answers in a well, no, in a very direct sense, why a Mick Jagger, even after 50 years going strong, uh,
Yeah.
does what he does, or a Willie Nelson.
Yeah.
This is the things that they do. It just is what it is. Now, on the opposite of that, or not even opposite, just on a parallel course,
Hmm.
and to emphasize with what. So I agree
Well,
with what you said. I mean,
mhm.
we're here. We might as well do good. But where does that come from? There's a few choices there. Maybe they all overlap, but leaving that to the side. Um, I always question, and I've questioned it here with you. Imagine, and I've told you, like, imagine like some sort of army general in some Roman town, um, and their whole bit, as opposed to like CNC and creative stuff, and gathering a community and sharing knowledge and the things that, um, this guy is on about conquering lands, killing, overtaking populations, causing misery. But to him, he's gaining power, even in the wake of all these people. So,
Well,
well, no, let me say the full thought. The full thought is that that's the a guy. So that's like a
mhm.
prototype of what I'm saying, as opposed to what you're saying. 2,000 years on, that guy's no longer around. He did his damage. As far as we know, he's not he's unaware of like automobiles or whatever the hell. Um, but during your lifetime, to create havoc in others, I mean, some things can't be helped, but um, like a Napoleon, or something like that, or a Hitler. I mean,
But
I guess
I,
you get the point. There's people that are on about doing stuff regardless of the damage and stuff, and I find that that the epitome of feudal.
mhm. But see, you also have to remember that there was a massive priority shift, and people will argue about when it happened 19th century, 20th century, 21st century. It's been a lot more prevalent since about 1985, somewhere around mid 80s, that the priority back then during that Roman general's time was to leave your mark on the earth, to make a name for yourself, make a name for your family, and have monuments erected in your honor. I mean, and that goes all the way back. I mean, past ancient Egypt and past ancient Roman and ancient Greek and all that, was to make your mark, leave your mark on the earth, and be remembered for eternity. And that began to go away. I can't say exactly when it started because I've seen arguments on all sides, but by the mid 1980s, it was to leave as little trace as possible. We went from having huge mausoleums erected in our honor to now, in many cases, not even a grave marker, and ashes being scattered at sea or things of that nature, to maybe a small little plaque on a columbarium wall. We want to leave as little of a mark as we can that we were ever here.
I'm gonna slightly push back on that.
Go ahead.
Maybe you haven't thought of this
Well, no,
angle.
there are exceptions, of course, but I mean the overwhelming prevalence is for less and less of a mark, less and less of a name, with exceptions, obviously.
I'm gonna push back
Mhm.
and tell me if you see this or you don't.
Okay.
Throughout all of history that we're aware of, the majority of people were regular people,
Hmm.
and the case was that their their place of rest
Hmm.
was nothing to write home about. It was only the conquerors and people of import,
Hmm.
um, that, I mean, think of things like the pyramids, or I don't know,
Well,
etched in stone, this, and that. And to bring it forward to present day, world leaders today, have the same it's a modernized version, but think of things like our president's tombs or
Right.
presidential libraries. Um, and if you leave this country, think of people like, well, for instance, Fidel Castro. They have this monument thing, and other across
Right.
across the world. So I would correct to say that leaders have always done that.
And that's what I
Probably,
mean, that there are exceptions to that. But you have to have a certain personality to want that position of power anyway. But I'm talking about the regular guy. It's no longer a desire as much. There are exceptions, but it's no longer as huge as a desire to have that big mausoleum for the family. Let's take that Roman general. At that time, he knew that there was every possibility that there would be statues erected in his honor. If he defeated this particular tribe and conquered their lands, there could be statues and possibly even shrines erected in his honor. We've done it here. I mean, you see General Sherman's horse and you see Ulysses S. Grant and this, that, and the other as generals beyond their presidential graves and what have you. But there is no Norman Schwarzkopf statue or monument to him. There is no Eisenhower monument to him. There's no uh, um, um, Patton, General Patton. There's no real. I mean, and these were some of the greatest American generals. That has kind of gone by the wayside. You have to basically want political power and to be a leader, a world leader, in order to have that presidential library or possibly even a memorial, in your honor.
there's a lot of
So,
look.
and those will be the exceptions. But
Yeah,
for
but
the
now we're splitting hairs. Yes, I'm hearing what you're saying, but my specific reason for making the or splicing it
Mhm,
was to say that regular people in general across time, regardless, have a certain thing, but people with power or money or this or that
mhm,
have a different set of, and so they'll construct. I mean, if you can make a
yeah,
little angel on top of your tomb, that's what some people will do according to
right,
what they can afford. And if you can
sure,
erect, some people might. So broadly speaking, the whole idea that I originally was saying is that regardless of that
mhm,
tomb or
mhm,
this or that, um, to the person, it's only a thought when it's a thought. When there's no more thought, it doesn't freaking matter. I
No, it
mean,
doesn't matter. But it doesn't matter to us. Whether it matters to them, we can't tell unless they tell us. So,
no, no,
I
no. I don't know what you're saying. What do you mean?
is it, you're saying it doesn't matter at the end when you're gone. It doesn't matter.
Right, for the so like let's say the
It
person is thinking,
mhm,
I'm gonna have this so that my memory and this and that, and that's helping that person while they're alive,
right.
because in their mind they're preparing for some this and that
Mhm,
that will stand the test of time and this and that. But all that machination
mhm,
is irrelevant at one point after the fact to that person. The concept is it's kind of a strange thing because the mortality of it,
mhm.
uh, and the trying to cheat the reaper, let's say.
Well,
uh,
yeah, because they say that you die twice. Once when you physically die. That's the first time you die. The second time you die is the last time somebody mentions your name. So
think about go ahead.
so we have certain people who are brought up in conversation daily, maybe not by us, but somewhere around the country somebody is talking about Abraham Lincoln or somebody is talking about Thomas Jefferson or George Washington, or they're talking about Charlemagne, or they're talking about Queen Elizabeth. Every day, somebody is talking about somebody who has passed.
Mhm.
So those people have died once, they've not died the second time. But the guy who used to live four doors down from you, maybe you can remember his name, maybe you can't. It's quite possible to him, he has already, to you rather, he has already died twice by the simple fact that you can't remember his name or her name or whatever. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
yeah. I'm just saying that all these considerations
Mm-hmm.
exist in the realm of the living.
Oh yeah, I mean, it couldn't exist anywhere else because we've never been anywhere else to know. So
Yeah. So
so well,
the
but
idea of the idea of I'm going back to the general thing. The
mhm,
idea of that while you are around to cause grief and whatnot in order to exalt your station in life
yeah,
is a fool's errand. In
hmm
my This is my opinion, is a fool's errand because you're just bullcrapping yourself in terms of and it's a fool's errand in effect, but it's not a fool's errand in the in the space in between the ears to
yeah,
the person, because they're imagining, oh, I'm getting this power and this and that, and sure enough they get the power and this and that, they're causing havoc,
well,
with overtaking villages and such, whatever the case. um so some things can't be helped. If you're a tribe and there's another tribe and there's battles, and what are you going to do, and you have to, so there's all these things happening, but my
sure.
point is that, to sum it up, why do harm when to acquire an advantage? It's an ethical uh
Yeah,
cost,
and
you know
everybody has their own scale of what ethical is, and then you have that certain percentage that just doesn't care about ethics.
that just doesn't care, doesn't run through their mind.
It's all about me.
Right. So now, where does that, this notion, or, and you expressed it well when you said not to leave anything that would cause harm or embarrassment and such to my loved ones and whatnot. And I kind of gave you a version of that with, like, using this Roman guy.
Hmm
Why would one want to cause harm and stuff? Well, where does that come from? That pause in willy nilly, free for all, debauchery, screw it, it's all going in a handbasket anyhow, so let's get our kicks while the kicking is good. Where does that pause come from?
I think that's going to be up to the individual because, I mean, to the megalomaniac, there is no pause.
No, no, no,
To go ahead.
no. Where does that pause that we're speaking of,
Hmm
specifically what we're speaking of, what I'm mentioning? Yes, we know the other stuff, of people that want to do harm, but where does that notion of pause come from?
I think that's up to the individual. I mean, you can quote scripture, you can talk about spirituality, you can talk about morality, and you can talk about ethics and what have you. And each person is going to have their own definition and a sliding scale as to what they think those things are. I don't know that you could give a cut and dried answer and say
Where
it
do
comes
you
from
think
here.
where do you think it comes from?
Again, like I said, I think I can only speak for myself, but for society at large, I can't speak for that because I think there are too many outside influences. It depends on your culture. If you come from a warlike culture to where that's like the Spartans, everything about them was geared towards war. They didn't give a damn about art. They didn't give a damn about literature. Everything about them was geared towards war. If you're raised in that kind of an environment, your definition of ethics and what is acceptable is going to be completely different from the Athenians, who did care about art, who did care about literature, who did care about poetry. I mean, they weren't doormats. Sure, they had a military, but they cared about other things besides just the military. So I think there are too many outside influences to say, you know, any to speak for anybody but myself. And with me, it's a belief in a creator who doesn't care about all that other crap. He cares about decency.
I saw a video the other day where a moose
Hmm.
came out to the road and people were frightened, this and that, and it was one
Hmm.
of those short clip things.
Yeah.
And one person took note of it because the moose wasn't being aggressive,
Hmm.
but it was trying to gather attention and it looked uncomfortable, so he stopped and the moose walked him back, and in a moat full of mud was his little tribe or whatnot, stuck. Some of them were so tired that they lost their battle.
Hmm.
Others were just exhausted, and so the guy and others started to gather, and they took ropes, tied them, started pulling them. It was more than they could handle.
Hmm.
They got them out. They could barely walk,
Yeah.
and the moose. I mean, it didn't say, "Hey, thanks, guys," but
Yeah.
to them, it showed appreciation. It stuck around. It looked at them. So these are animals, and the idea is to preserve their little tribe. They looked for help, and these other living beings, not of their tribe, came and saw the vulnerability in the situation.
And assisted. Yeah.
And the notion that human beings can look upon a creature that's not a human being, we do it all the time, but we're looking at this and feel a
Well,
um,
feel empathy. Yeah.
an empathy, and then act upon that to rescue them.
Hmm.
Um, Not sharing any, you know,
Well,
species, thing is pretty. Anybody can turn the page on it.
yeah.
Nothing to see here,
Well,
right? But I don't think that way. I
I,
don't think that way.
I, I think it comes down to, well, number one, the inquisitiveness of the first guy to pick up on that and notice, wait a minute, something's not right here. Why is this animal acting this way? Some would say he's pretty foolhardy because he could have got the crap stomped out of him. I mean, have you been next to a moose? I only at zoos have I ever been around a moose, and 6 feet at the shoulder, that's a big son of a gun. No, I ain't messing with you. Um, but I think most people don't like to see creatures of any kind suffer. And they were obviously suffering. I mean, it's the same mentality of people trying to drag dolphins and, beluga whales and things like that back into the water. You don't want to see creatures suffer, you know.
On the other hand,
There are exceptions, of course. There are others who would just say, oh man, look at this, and go start shooting and throw them in the back of the truck. We're having steaks tonight.
that's the second time you use the exception thing. The exception thing is not to discount. The exception thing is to look at the picture. That very same guy, as an example, could just as well do that you're saying and
Yeah.
shoot up the place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then from person to like, it could very well be that there's a mass murderer kind of guy,
Sure.
but on the flip side, every time he sees a like cat, he's all melted butter. Like, you know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Like,
Yeah, I do.
so this
And we're weird about that, but go ahead.
so this thing that I'm saying, where you have this possibility all baked in to one human being, which we're using as a sample for
Hmm.
the possibility of all human. You could have on one the quite the amount of kindness and compassion, but turn the page, let's say, and that same compassionate person can be the most ruthless Napoleon that
Oh
this
yeah,
side of Dawn has ever seen. And
yeah.
how do you all those contradictions and variables that is, I mean, all of that is just John. One person can be kind to one person
Hmm.
for whatever reason.
Well,
Maybe they remind them of their uncle, or maybe they just like their hairstyle, or who knows what the hell. But at the next turn, some other person, it's full on frickin' war. And so there's even that. There's
well,
that.
and that's why I say there are, there are so many variables. It's hard to really pinpoint what triggers that, where that kind of thing comes from. Where did his compassion and his inquisitiveness to follow that moose, or even to notice he was being led down there? Where did that come from? It's hard to say. There are so many variables within people. Because, I mean, as you said, other people just ran off. Oh my God, there's a moose. It's going to attack us. Then again, you have the other people stopping on the side of the road at Yellowstone and wanting to walk up and pet a buffalo because they think that this is a house pet, and then have the guts to act surprised when half of the family gets run over and stomped.
Yeah.
They're called wild animals for a reason. So for him to even be the least bit inquisitive to me is a little odd to begin with, in my opinion. But when it all came about, it all worked out, I guess, for most of them in the end. So, I mean, but you had a sliding scale of variables that went in one direction, could have gone completely differently.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. I guess my whole broader point in starting this whole thing was to ask you the question: do you think that there comes a point where people need to just stop, evaluate, and maybe just reflect and do a little bit of self-evaluation and decide, should I keep going, or do you
With the
think
music,
that's with anything?
oh well, with anything, there's gotta be, yeah, of course. We
Yeah.
evaluate all the time, but like with the music,
Hmm.
until he,
Until he can't do it anymore, I guess go for it, huh?
whatever his prerogative is,
Hmm.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, whatever his prerogative, like Mick Jagger's thing is,
Hmm.
you know, if he wants to rock and roll, and it's just, it doesn't, but I mean, I don't know. I've done music since I was like 15 up until a few years ago, all the time.
Hmm.
And I could pick it up anytime again, but
Hmm.
my mind is in another thing, and it just
Yeah,
happened.
your priority changed. Yeah.
I can't think of. I could imagine it, but like, I'm sure they have other interests,
Hmm.
but like, music is one discipline, and there's many things within that.
Hmm.
I could see people going up, but wherever your muse is where
Yeah.
you can't fight that
No.
successfully.
No. Yeah. Okay. Well,
You know what I'm
and
saying? So
and and on the other side of that same coin, there are performers that are in their 40s or 50s
that are all washed
who
up.
basically are, yeah, they're
Yeah,
yesterday's news, and they've gone on to other things. Some of them have just focused mainly on songwriting. Some of them have tried to come back, and they just can't. They can't hit that high note, or they just don't have that the ability to consistently perform like they used to. I'm
yeah.
looking straight at you, Axl Rose. Um, so it's time for them maybe to think about something else. John Bon Jovi is an example of that. He decided that he had his time and he started focusing on songwriting. He still performs every once in a while, but nothing like what he used to. And he's also changed up some of his music to reflect that. That, yeah, I can't get out there and suspend myself from wires and scream living on a prayer anymore. So I'm going to kind of tone
More
it
like
down and
living
back
on
it
a
off a little
prairie.
bit. Yeah. I can't, I, my time for that is done. Let's focus on this over here, you know, and I have respect for that too. You know,
Yeah.
when you realize that, I'm not some 22-year-old whiskey rock and roller anymore. I need to kind of reevaluate. Let's think about what direction I want to go. I have a lot of respect for that as well.
Yeah. I mean, you
So,
know, um, if you think about like a variation on this theme that you're talking about,
hmm
sticking with the music,
hmm
you think about the blues players from back in the day.
hmm
I was buying some really old guys playing guitar.
you and me both.
And so the quality there was the blues, of course, but they were so old in my
Yeah,
mind. They were probably in their 50s, but in my mind, they were like, damn.
yeah,
Um, to me, they were so darn old that they sang so raw. They had some wisdom to impart, man.
yeah.
You better listen to Howling Wolf.
hmm
Um, so things like the blues, you could go well into the future, and you could still do it up because there's a value. But the rock and roll, the problem is, if blues players were wearing spandex in their early years, it would be a total hot mess now. But rock and roll has that problem, and so they have to figure on how do we
Yeah,
adapt to change, because rock and roll is a different thing. There's this sex and vitality and whiskey, like you said, sort of thing. And even though blues has that, it's more like the guy sitting at the back of the bar with his suitcase and luggage, waiting for the next train, and he's
uh-huh.
just like, there's a different vibe.
And hoping that train is going slow enough that I can catch up to it and jump on. You
Well,
know,
I was
um,
thinking,
yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, I heard it said once that blues ain't nothing but a good man feeling bad, and if you listen to it, you'll pick up on that. Or it's I don't know, it's kind of almost folkish in some ways. Talking about mining disasters and when the levee breaks and things like that. But it all comes down to experiences, and there's a lot of history involved in blues as well. If you sit down and listen to it and kind of pick it apart a little bit, if you know anything at all about the performer, you can pick apart history within the verses. And that's interesting to me. It always has been. But yeah, I mean, blues and jazz got together, had a baby, and they named it rock and roll. And that was it. And it's gone all over the place since then, everywhere.
I got a lot of crap from friends because I was into the blues. It
Yeah,
was all,
well,
all it was all alternative music, and
all grunge all the time.
yeah, and the thing is that I was on a journey to
hmm
learn, and I wanted to know the stories and histories behind the music. And I respected the dark secrets of yesteryear as opposed to just what was brand new. And some of my friends were not
Well,
digging that vibe at all.
that's because you were a student of the music. You weren't just out to hop onto the latest trend and do what you thought was cool. You were a student of the music. Because look at the people that you looked up to. Just take the Beatles. Who did they listen to? Who was their inspiration? Who did they look up to? You
Buddy
know,
Holly and stuff like that.
Buddy
Elvis,
Holly, and
Little Richard.
you remember the first tour with Roy Orbison when they talked about that? Roy Orbison was supposed to headline, but by the time it all got worked out, the Beatles were getting to be more popular than Roy Orbison, and it was like a co-bill. It wasn't who was the opening act, who was the the main performer. It was kind of a co-bill by the time the concerts started happening.
Yeah.
And even there's a video on YouTube about how the Traveling Wilburys came together and how the idea started with George Harrison and Jeff Lynne, and how they started getting everybody together, and they got them all together at Dylan's studio and this, that, and the other. And they said whenever Roy Orbison stepped into the recording booth to do his part, all of them, every one of them, stopped whatever they were doing and just went in and it stood outside the booth and just watched Roy, because everybody was still so starstruck by this guy. He was Harrison's idol. And it just kind of, when you think about it, this happened in the 80s. They had 30 years of history as
You're right.
peers with one another, and he was still starstruck by this guy.
Yeah.
you know that says something. And it's about a 25-minute video, um and it's on, I believe, the Traveling Wilburys YouTube channel, their official channel. It was really a good little glimpse into how that all came together and how the music came together. And I thought that was really cool. That to me also garnered another level of respect, because you had those guys who got together. You had Jeff Lynne from the Electric Light Orchestra. You had George Harrison from the Beatles and a long solo career. You had Bob Dylan. You had Tom Petty. Then you had Jim Kelter on drums. Um, for those people and Roy Orbison, of course, for those people to get together and do that with an equal split throughout, all across, every one of them got writing credits, every one of them got performance credits, everyone, it was all equal. For all of these big names to put egos aside and come together and do something just for fun, to me, that's unreal.
Yeah.
That's unreal.
Yeah. It was a fun. They had a few good songs. I liked some of their songs, not all of them.
If you watch that documentary, that little video documentary on how they came together and everything, it just looks, you can tell that they just had a genuinely good time doing that, making that first record. They just enjoyed themselves.
They were on MTV all the time.
Hmm.
Do you
Yeah.
remember?
Oh yeah. Oh
It
yeah.
was Lita Ford, Roy Orbison, Alice Cooper,
ZZ
uh,
Top.
ZZ Top, Ozzy Osbourne, but not as much because he was earlier, but
Hmm.
still he was there. Um, they would play them till White Snake, and I
Yeah.
loved it. I loved it all.
I watched to a certain point, but then pretty soon it just got to be where I had other things I could focus on. Then, like, we went to Germany, and there was no MTV over there. You had the Armed Forces Radio Network and Armed Forces Television, which was the only English channels. and so you were kind of captivate. You were kind of captive. You had one English channel on TV and one radio station, and that was it. So, well, what can you do? It was okay. We made do, but that they would switch genres over the course of the day. Certain time it'd be top 40 pop, certain time it'd be country, certain time it would be R&B and soul, and then toward later in the evening it would be kind of almost not quite FM radio type of a more free form kind of a thing, but it was it, that introduced a lot of people to a lot of music they probably wouldn't have been exposed to otherwise. So it was, all in all, it was a good experience, but it was kind of strange. Yeah.
It's all strange, dude. Like everything is freaking. I suggest
People are strange when
everything is
you're a
freaking strange.
stranger. Yep. Yep.
Like everything, dude. Like freaking everything, dude. Like, and I'm not even saying that to. I'm emphasizing it right now, but it's like
Hmm.
everything is freaking strange, dude. Especially if you step outside of yourself half a minute and say to yourself, "Okay, I know I'm Eloy, but let's step outside for what the hell's going on around here?"
Or you says, speaking of strange, here I am. Yeah, there's something to be said for a guy who carves a narwhal, but it looked good. Looked ding dong good. I like that.
It's perfectly within the spectrum
Hmm.
of human beings crafting and
Hmm.
doing those things which they get inspired to do and this and that. But if you step yourself outside of yourself and say, "What the hell? This freaking whale creature this guy's on about, and how did he even get to even?" It's just you could stamp anything with freaking strange. This world, this existence, the images.
But see, that's what makes it so cool, is because it is a strange idea. That's not anything that would have popped into my brain at all. But did you look at it? And I mean, look at it closely. He did a damn good job. I mean, it's freaking beautiful.
I look at everything closely.
It's
Pic.
art, man.
I
It's
examined every one of his picture without having it in front of me.
Yeah, it was just flipping amazing to me, and it's like, damn, I love it. I love it. It's a unicorn gone aquatic. Yeah, there you go. But
Um,
it's not trash talking when you can back it up. You know what I mean? But Dan is not that kind of guy. He's not the, oh yeah, I'm this and I'm that and I'm the other. He's not. He's that guy quietly in the corner doing it, not talking about it. You know.
yeah,
I remember a hangout that it was you, me, Steve, Dan. There were a couple of other people in there, and he was talking about this mallet he was making for some contest or competition, and he
yeah.
picked up this thing, and he's talking about how he carved this and he carved that and carved on the other. My jaw just kept going lower and lower and lower and lower, and I'm like, damn, that thing is beautiful, man. How the heck? Wow. And I must have said wow 700 times that night.
I think it was a Celtic.
Yeah. And he's tossing it around like it was nothing, like it was a rock he found out in the front yard. You know, it's like, damn, dude, don't damage it.
I
I don't know.
mean, think about that. A human being doing something, and not everybody does, which most people don't do.
Right.
Very specific reality thing
Hmm.
within this greater reality of a guy doing this,
Hmm.
which we call art, and there's practical uses for it apart from just observing it,
Hmm.
for what it is. But just look, I'll extrapolate just using Dan as a jump off point. It's I'm amazed all the time, all the freaking time,
Hmm.
of all the insane things that I have not thought of that other people have,
Hmm.
and how I get the free ride to put that in my pocket as knowledge
Yeah.
because someone already did the work. All I had to do was knock on the door
Yeah.
or stumble on it for some weird reason. And like Facebook has groups that have all sorts of
Yeah.
specific interests, and
Hmm.
people share their unique whatnots. And it's
Hmm.
like, dude, this is if this is not jaw, you don't have to go far. Well, yeah, I have to go far enough, but to be jaw dropped in this life,
Yeah.
it's just mind blowing.
Yeah. I remember a woodworking magazine that I had. Oh my gosh, this is back in the 90s. And they featured a carver. I've always been fascinated by wood carvers, by people who have that talent and that ability, because it's not something that I can picture myself doing. I imagine if I could be trained in it and really focus on it and spend the hours to learn it, I might be able to do it. Um, but some of the things people do are just absolutely jaw dropping. Like I said, they featured this guy who did wood carvings of the most mundane, regular things, commonplace, ordinary things. And one that sticks out in my brain was he took a big piece of, I think it was maple, I may not have been maple, and he carved what looked like a pair of blue jeans folded up. And that you would swear if this wasn't the color of wood, none of it was painted or dyed or stained. It was all whatever the wood color was. You would swear you could pick this up and shake it out and put them on. It looked like a pair of blue jeans. The rivet over in the corner of the pocket and the stitching around the pockets and the button with the logo of the company on the button, every fold, every pleat, all that stuff. And I'm like, my God, this guy is insane. But I would have never have thought to hand carve a folded up pair of jeans. Where does that thought come from? I mean, wow.
I mean, I've
So,
seen stuff like that.
okay, Dan says, I saw that. Those were awesome. Yeah, it was fantastic. But it's the most mundane thing you could ever think of to why would somebody carve a pair of blue jeans? I don't know. Maybe because everybody else was already carving old world Santa Clauses and they were becoming too mundane themselves, too common. I,
It's,
I think it's great.
I mean, it's just um the passage of time part.
Hmm.
To go back to that, just half a second,
Sure.
and the
Well,
leaving things behind, and what does
mhm.
it matter to the person that left them? To the people alive, those things do matter, obviously.
Mhm.
Um, Using an example, film footage my father filmed,
Mhm.
letters and such, and
Mhm.
photographs and all that.
Yeah, I see you've been posting a few here lately, and I'm
And I
enjoying
always
them.
post, yeah. So to me, it's super valuable. So there is that
I
from
I think it's
our,
very enjoyable.
yeah, and enjoyable because one reflects and there's just so
Mhm.
all these things, but and one recounts and all this and that,
Right.
and what else is there to do? If you ask the question, you could say, well, heck, there's a bunch of other things to do. True, but one does what one is compelled to do by their what they feel,
Mhm.
and so to each their own is what I say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So just that's the flip of
Yeah,
that.
and I agree with that. If it's not bothering somebody else, I 100% agree with that.
Yeah,
You know, if your thing is painting, paint. If it's knitting or weaving, knit or weave. If your
and you
thing
couldn't stop them
is
if you wanted to.
no, and but why would you want to?
I'm saying that
You
it
know.
goes without saying
Hmm.
also, although one has to say it, because that's what we're talking about. But
Sure.
even if someone came to, well, look, listen, Eloy, as an example, you've written plenty of little short bits and photos and stuff.
Hmm.
Now it's time to return to your music. As good as that may sound, that idea would be, as an example, this is just it
Hmm.
could be anything, anybody, anytime, anywhere. Um, the factor involved that is the decisive factor is me wanting to.
Exactly.
Without
Exactly.
that, the best idea,
Exactly.
even and one can recognize an idea is
Hmm.
good and still say thanks, good idea, I'll keep that one in mind.
Hmm.
However, and so there's that. So
Yeah. If
human
you
beings
don't
are
want to
involved.
do it, if you don't want to do it, there's nothing anybody can do that's going to make you want to. You
Exactly.
know. So yeah, and
And that's
but
why you do what you, that's why Mark Lindsay
mhm.
does the things that he does in exactly the way he does it,
Well,
according to his judgment calls, preferences, limitations, attribute, all the very. That's why Mark Lindsay is on the journey that he is,
yeah,
because he does that which he is, on about, and so,
and
and
having a
we
ball doing it.
recognize it,
Yeah.
and we recognize it. At best, I'll give you an idea, like when you were doing the shop, and or you said to me, I think maybe a little darker for the walls or lighter. No, I think this is and maybe we share back and forth, but in no way
Hmm.
in that exchange. This is just an example. It could be
Hmm.
anybody, anywhere, anytime. Um, in no way in that conversation am I thinking that what I'm sharing with you is anything other than a suggestion from my point of view, according to these factors. But the idea of saying, well, if Mark, like, let's say, well, if Mark doesn't paint that damn wall the color that I'm saying, he screwed everything up and
Hmm.
everything's to hell.
But
You know,
the, but yeah, I and I get that. You're absolutely right, because who are you to impose your choices on me?
yeah,
If I ask you an opinion, that's a completely different thing. Personally, I think that's going a little bit dark. Really? And why is that? And I'll ask for your reasoning and things. But that's a back and forth. That's a conversation. I asked for your opinion. You know, if I threw it out there and somebody said, "Oh, that's going to look like a giant turd," I'll be like, "Oh, really? Well, thank you for your opinion." It'll be ignored in the order in which it's received. If or no, don't you dare paint it that. Don't you dare do that. It's just like, who the hell are you? You're not my mama. Shut up. You know.
yeah. Well, the
So
doubling down factor is also part of human beings. So sometimes,
yeah, stubbornness. Yeah.
sometimes we could use the advice, but we don't take it due to the doubling down bit.
Hmm.
And as long as at some point one, I guess it depends. For me, eventually I learn.
Hmm.
That's how I look at it. Eventually I learn.
Difference between me and my brother. I was that kid who dad said, "Don't put your finger in that light socket. Don't stick that screwdriver in that light socket. You're going to get shocked." And I was like, "Oh, okay." He knows something I don't know. My brother was, "Oh, okay." And then he'd wait till dad wasn't looking and do it anyway. Yeah, he got shocked. He got the bejeebers zapped out of him, but he wouldn't believe what somebody else said. He had to experience it himself. So some people are just learning different ways. It's like, okay, you were
There's
warned.
pros and cons to that.
Yeah.
I listened to people when they explained stuff when I was a kid,
Mhm.
but I was never satisfied. It wasn't good enough. I wanted to know, oh yeah, but why? And it got to the point with my aunt, and she's
Mhm.
like, it's too early in the, like, she'd take me to school and she'd stop and buy me like some breakfast so that I keep
Mhm.
my mouth shut, because I'd ask her why about everything. It was like constantly why.
Yeah.
And history that's followed me all my life. And if you're set in one way, well, what the hell?
Yeah.
It is, it is what it is. I can tell what annoys people sometimes. Um, just across life because I
Hmm.
wouldn't take the answer for the answer unless it's something silly and
Well,
simple. But if it's
you know,
something
you
complex, let's revisit that again and again and again and again. And other people may be different. It may not be important to other people to revisit something, let's say, or other people on the other hand, um, might add it up and they solve the calculation right
well,
off the bat. Everybody's different.
you're right. Everybody is different. Jim Dockrell says some people you can tell, some people you have to show. Then there are people who just have to pee on that electric fence for themselves. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But it also depends on the situation. Like, nobody had to tell me that putting my finger into a spinning table saw blade was probably going to end up in a bad with a bad thing happening. I did not have to be told that. You can look at it and you can see what's going on, you know. But uh, putting this type of glue on plastic, well, why doesn't it work? I think that's a valid question. If you don't know, why doesn't that work? And if you want to try it. The worst that can happen is it doesn't work. It will fail. And it's like, oh, okay. That's why I say I very rarely learn anything from my successes, but I almost always learn something from my failures, even if all I learn is, so that's why they don't do it that way. You know, it's very rare that I learn something from a success because I followed all my steps. Okay, great. I've got the thing. I'm happy I've got the thing. It looks great. Hey, I like it. Perfect.
Yeah.
Maybe I learned one or two things along the way, but probably not, you know.
I mean, it's an ego boost when you get things right,
Oh yeah.
or it's a joyful thing.
Yeah.
But the mistakes part, as uncomfortable as they help us
Yeah. Well,
make corrections.
you're gonna make mistakes. Nobody knows everything. You're gonna make mistakes, and hopefully you learn something from those mistakes and move on. I mean, and that's all you can really hope for.
I mean,
And
yeah.
you've got to have that curiosity. You've got to be able to step back and analyze a little bit and try to figure out what happened. Why did that do that? And that may mean you put whatever you're doing on hold for a week and research. I mean, it could be.
Why doesn't this porta potty have toilet paper and I'm here in the middle of a job site? Oh well, it's too late now.
You know,
Next time, next
really.
time, toilet paper in the trunk of your car.
Now, let me ask you this about that. You say you've never been satisfied with, you always wanted to investigate, and I get that. That's natural curiosity. But when you're in that situation, does why really matter? When you get to that point, there's no toilet paper. Does why really matter? It just is.
No, what matters after that
Yeah.
is what am I going to do?
Yeah, it just is. Why doesn't matter. So
I carried toilet paper after that. I sure did.
we've got a roll in the back of the Jeep.
Rolling,
Yep,
rolling with
that's
the roll of paper.
we got a little net thing, cargo thing in the passenger side in the quarter panel behind the rear tires, a little net carrier thingy. And there's a tape measure, there's a roll of toilet paper, there's a pair of gloves, there's some
I
other
spent a
odds and ends.
decade in the trunk of my car with two toolboxes with all variations on everything. anywhere I went.
I finally figured out in like my 40s that if I need to carry a toolbox in my car and I'm not a mechanic, I need to get a better car. If I need that toolbox to to feel secure in going anywhere and getting home, if I need that toolbox there, I need a better car, and that's all there is to it.
Yeah, um that wasn't my case. Um
No,
and
I
it's the
wasn't suggesting it was. It,
and it's the same. Well, no, you in a way, because that's what I said, and then you said, but I took it. Well, number one, I worked in the Everglades,
mhm.
and I drove out in the woods and whatnot. Um, but seeing my dad always having tools,
Mhm.
um, this is what a man does, and
Yes.
so
Yeah.
but the sheer here's the thing about that: the sheer fact of having the tools, buying the tools.
Uh-huh.
I'm talking about when I was in my 20s and stuff,
Yeah.
like starting out. Um, you start using them for all sorts of stuff,
Oh yeah.
and so the sheer fact of having it um, puts them to use. At well, in theory, it would put them to. In my case, it made me put them to use. And hell, I even carried water in the car
Mhm. Yeah.
as an additional thing. So
We've got 2 2-liter jugs of water in the driver's side uh, rear seat floorboard. 2 jugs of water.
yeah, so I mean, it's sort of that thing, but and no, and if somebody needs something, you have the
Mhm.
tools,
Well,
there as well, as a secondary benefit to that, for the better of maybe your friends or whatnot and this and that.
well, you
So
you you've got an older car, so you kind of know what I'm talking about. But if you've never owned an old pickup, you don't know how creative people can get with tools to keep that sucker running. I mean, I joke about it, but it's kind of sort of almost true. I knew what they were, but I joke about I was in my early 20s before I figured out a pair of vice grip pliers wasn't the window handle on a 64 Chevy pickup. You
yeah,
know, they could be used as pliers too. I was like, I didn't know they could do that. I thought they were just for window handles.
let me let
You
my
know,
dog out because I think
all
he's
right.
gonna pee,
Uh oh. Yep.
and I don't want him to do that
Mm-hmm.
inside.
Tab A and slot one are not lining up. Yeah, I mean, that happens. Tab A and slot B do not always fit together, but anything will fit together if you have a big enough hammer jam. And, that's all there is to it. Well, that don't fit. Use a bigger hammer. Okay. Let's see here. Dan says people do some awesome stuff. That they do. That they do. And some of the things just amaze me. There's some awesome people out there, some awesome art being made. Let's see here. Um, Jamie Page, hey JP, said that was a great time. Summer of '71. I can't remember it, but I'll never forget it. Lemmy, yeah, from Motorhead, yeah, yeah. Can't remember it, but I'll never forget it. What was it? I heard I had a good time. Yeah, they tell me I had a good time. Oh my gosh. Well, one more little brief subject to get into. Um, I was watching, I think it was, let me back up a minute here. You remember the movie The Princess Bride?
Yeah, I think you told me about it, and then I watched it.
Yeah, I think it was me and Dan Haryu, and I think Greg was involved in this. Maybe Steve was involved. I think we basically browbeat you into watching it.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember.
there was that one scene in that movie where Princess was, going to um, unalive herself with a knife through her chest. And the romantic lead, Carrie Elwes, he says, "There's a shortage of perfect breasts in this world. It would be a pity to ruin yours."
Yeah.
That came up again today. Um, I was watching a video on YouTube, and down in the comments, they got onto talking about movie reboots and remaking classic movies or classic television shows as movies. And for a little while, there was some discussion about remaking The Princess Bride, doing a reboot of that movie or that franchise. And somebody asked Cary Elwes what he thought of it. And he came up with, I think, the perfect quote. He said, "There's a shortage of perfect movies in this world. It would be a pity to ruin that one." And I think he hit the nail right on the head. And that made me get in and start looking at movie reboots.
Oh yeah.
What do you think of that subject as a whole? Taking an established movie that was real popular and then remaking it 20, 30 years later with a different spin and a different
Yeah.
cast and all this
Why
other stuff.
not? I mean, a lot of them are crap, but yeah, some
Yeah,
of them are good. Some of them are good. You know,
like what? Can you think of one off the top of your head that you thought was as good as the original?
the Manchurian Candidate was good
Which
with
one?
Denzel.
With Denzel? Okay, I didn't see that one. I saw the original. Oh God, it's been years now. Years ago.
Spider Man was pretty good the first
Um,
time around, but after like 19 Spider Mans after, it's like, give me a break.
yeah, and this I think the same thing with Batman
Or Superman. How many
and
freaking?
Superman. Yeah,
It's like, for goodness sakes.
it's everybody who has a director's credit wants to make a new movie. You know, wants to rebrand this as theirs. You know,
I mean, but then again, we've been around the block sufficient
yeah,
where the kids that are watching that now
hmm,
had no idea of the original one anyhow.
true,
I mean,
true.
literally, we've been around for like 29 Batmans now.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's
to
not even
me,
counting.
I'm so old. To me, Batman is still Adam West. Okay, that's just me. That's just my.
That's the Batman I grew up with because it was the reruns.
Hmm.
That's what I saw, and he was kind of goofy and whatnot. But your imagination would take it into a cooler place.
Yeah.
Um, but then came the 1980s Batman, which was pretty freaking cool. Um,
Um,
but after a while, I'm done with it.
yeah, especially when there's a new one every 3 or 4 or 5 years. And I'm sorry, maybe I'm just a purist, but I think there are some movies that you just leave them alone. You just don't mess with it. Leave it alone. If you like the movie, watch that movie. But some movies are so. Let's take Citizen Kane or Gone with the Wind. Those movies stand out as epics. Why would you want to mess with it? What do you really think that you could do it better?
No, they're thinking about making money.
Exactly, 100%.
You know,
100%. I mean, I see some of these proposed. They're thinking about. There's talk about remaking the Birds, the Alfred Hitchcock movie from '63.
yeah.
I think that's a mistake. Do you really honestly think you can do better than Alfred Hitchcock? Come on. I think it's just to cash in on the name and make money.
Yeah, that's it. Dude, this whole thing's a machine, dude. Everything like this now, they're gonna
Hmm.
everything we said, they're gonna hierarchy it
Hmm.
in algorithms and say, okay, Mark could use three Batman movies
Hmm.
and whatever, and so they're gonna propagate that. They're gonna promote that. I mean, everything is sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything is sell. Either sell a way of thinking, or everything.
Do you have a movie? Let's stick with movies for a minute. Do you have a movie in mind that you really don't want anybody to try to remake? Because it's like if you're going to remake or reboot this movie or this series or this franchise, please don't do this one.
I can't think of one right now. I can't think of. Spider Man. No more Spider Mans, please.
Well, yeah, now I can agree with something like that. That was going to be my next grouping was we've had enough. Stop it, will you? And I'm the first one
We
to
have.
stand up and say, Star Wars, enough. Enough's enough. It's over. Okay. Stop it.
You know what I could use more of though?
What's that?
More Lord of the Rings movies.
Never saw any of them. So,
Never get tired of that. Love them.
yeah. Um,
Yeah.
I think the Marvel universe and the DC universe, I think they've run their course. And
Well,
now they're
they got to
just
make
getting
more money out
silly.
of it.
Now I think they're just getting silly. It's time
There's gonna
to.
be 10 more Iron Mans. You
There
just
were
wait.
there were a bazillion more comic books out there that you can draw from. You know, you remember The Crow?
Yeah.
They're talking about rebooting that one too. I think it's a mistake. I think it's a mistake.
Hollywood. I've lost like, well,
Yeah, I've
I mean,
I've lost a lot of respect for a lot of that myself. You know,
yeah.
and I used to be a real movie buff, but anymore, I really don't care.
Netflix is good though, because you get some cool ones in between
Hmm.
that are interesting.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Now,
it's just we've seen a lot,
mhm, we have.
so we kind of we're like, oh, that again.
Yeah, really. Did you see the Charlie's Angels reboot in 2019?
This is why we have to pick up skydiving, Mark. Something new. No, I didn't see the Charlie's
I
Angels.
didn't either. I didn't either. I just wondered if you had an opinion on it.
That's why we have to take up deep Appalachian cave exploration expeditions because we have to change it up slightly.
You know, that's getting. I don't know about Appalachian Cave
Alligator wrestling
exploration.
for Mark.
Yeah, no, that ain't gonna happen. You know, that ain't gonna happen.
Being dropped off somewhere in the South Pacific to fight
That ain't
pirates.
gonna happen. Not
Something
with
just
me. You know, I'm a,
a new muffin, a new 6 pack of muffins at Walmart.
that I
But
can deal with. That's more my speed. I'll be your taste tester, and I'll let you know if your banana guacamole is any good. But other than that, you know, I'm gonna leave that to the younger crowd. Okay.
Mark, did you make it to that African? Did you make it to that African expedition into the wild? No, but I've got these muffins.
It's it. And no, but I made it into the bakery section at my local Wally World, and I recommend you do it too. So, see, Dan says, I think I blame the Rocky franchise for the reboot sequel thing. Was it the first? Um, I don't know if Rocky was the first or Jaws. Yeah, that went downhill fast. The Jaws franchise went downhill fast. Um, or was it horror movies first? You know, I don't remember when they got on that kick about that time where it was a good movie, a solid movie. Jaws was a good example. But by the time they got into Jaws 4, it was like, oh, come on. You know?
Yeah. Oh, you know who did a lot of um what was this guy? Martin and Lewis. But they weren't reruns, they were more like a trend of
Yes.
of of, of
The
movies.
comedy team. Yes. Another one was Rambo. Now, the first Rambo movie, First Blood, That was a good movie.
It was great.
Then it got silly. Then it got silly. But that First Blood, that very first Rambo movie, that was a good flick. That was a real good movie.
Dude, this
But
guy, Rambo, couldn't get a break, dude. He's always
no,
battling the enemy. Shoot.
yeah. And then Chuck Norris got involved in his movies and all that other good stuff. And oh man,
He went into
oh well.
Afghanistan at one point, Rambo did.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it in the theaters, that one as well.
Mm-hmm.
And he got hurt, and in order to cauterize the wound through his gut, he he filled, he filled his gut with gunpowder
And lit it.
and lit it on fire, and the flame shot through the front.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the first movie, he fell down through the trees and lacerated his arm, and he had to stitch up his arm. So that you got to go somewhere from there. But then they just got silly.
they should make a Rocky goes to space.
Same with Rocky, the first one alone. Now, which one was it with Apollo Creed? That was actually fairly good.
Yeah,
Was that the
um,
first one or was that the second one?
that was with Mr. T as well, I think. No,
No, it wasn't him. It was, I can't remember his name. I can't remember that actor's name. Anyway,
Dolph Lundgren.
that was the third. Dolph Dolph Lundgren was that in 2 or 3?
I saw that one in the theaters,
I must break you. Yeah.
and you know he wasn't Russian.
No, I know. I must break you.
But from that point on,
And that whole thing was an accent. Yeah.
yeah, from that
Okay.
point on, everybody thought that Russians were
Mm-hmm.
monsters.
Dolph was 3. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. The other one, the Star Trek movies. The first one was okay.
I didn't like the first one. I liked the next few.
I liked the plot. You had to finish it up. You didn't learn till real late in the movie that the villain was a man-made satellite. It was Voyager 1 that we launched into space, years and years and years ago. I thought that was a decent premise for that flick. But after that, it's like, okay, here we go. Star Trek 65, the apology,
I went to see it with my dad,
Mm-hmm.
but I was used to Star Trek on TV.
Yeah.
And when we went to see it,
Mm-hmm.
and Shatner came on screen, and he had a permanent,
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
was like, what?
Yeah.
This isn't the Captain Kirk I want to see.
Yeah.
He had a freaking perm, dude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember that.
It's like, why?
Yeah, it was.
And it was striking for a little kid to see Captain Kirk, and all of a sudden now he's got a permanent on.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't even the freaking 60s anymore, 70s.
Well, I wasn't a fan
the
of the
70s?
TV series. I thought the TV series was kind of boring.
I loved it.
But I mean, it had its moments and what have you. But I don't know. But yeah, as Dan was, and this is where I was trying to go. As Dan said, the franchises are so valuable; they just keep grabbing new generations of fans. It'll go on forever.
Yeah.
And I think something that they used to do, and I don't even know if they do it anymore, but maybe it's something they should look into thinking about. They used to do re-releases. If a movie or a movie franchise was real popular, like let's take the original 3 Star Wars, they would re-release the first movie with the second movie. And then eventually they would do these marathon screenings where you'd have the first, then the second, then the third. So you got all 3 in a row. And that drew in more people to the first ones who maybe weren't around in 77 when the first one came along.
Yeah, that's how it was for me with Star Wars.
But I can remember when they re-released, well, talking about a Hitchcock, they re-released The Birds in the theaters, and they re-released Psycho in the theaters. It was 10 years old by that time, but there was a whole new generation that didn't see it the first time that it went through. So I don't know, maybe taking some of these blockbusters that were, I mean, just absolutely killer when we were growing up and re releasing them rather than reboot them. You know, I can't imagine a reboot of Back to the Future. To me, Michael J. Fox is always going to be Marty McFly. But if they re released, starting with that first flick, and then maybe next year release the second one, it might do something.
I mean, there might get a point. Is that people have the online stuff now, so it's like you can
Mhm.
watch it all online.
True, but movie theaters are still pretty successful. They're still people. I think people still like that escapism to go see it on the big screen.
I'm
And
sure.
Star Wars is a great example, man. If you have seen that movie on the big screen, your TV or a monitor just doesn't do it justice.
Which movie?
Star Wars, the original, the first
Oh
one that
yeah.
came out.
Oh yeah.
I
It's
mean,
different.
when I saw that at the drive-in when it first came out, and as a 16-year-old kid sitting there watching that opening shot where the credits finish crawling, and that camera drops down and there's this planet. It was like, whoa. And then all of a sudden there's a spaceship coming, from over the top of the camera, it looks like. It's like, holy hell. And then it's getting laser blasted, and an even bigger ship comes out over the camera. He's like, we had never seen anything like that before. That was just, I mean, that was state of the art special effects.
And it was.
It was just absolutely, are you kidding me? If you have only jumped on the Star Wars train in the last 5 or 6 years, if you saw that on the big screen, your whole perception of the movie would change.
And it's different now because
Mm-hmm.
if you watch that now as a kid, I mean, I'm sure it's exciting, but
Mm-hmm.
with all the technology, like movies with
Mm-hmm.
special effects, it wouldn't have the same impact. To us, it was shocking.
I think it would because of the big screen experience. Is like, holy cow, look at that. I
You
don't
think
know.
so?
I mean, there's going to be a certain percentage that go, yeah, those graphics, that CGI isn't all that good. Well, that's because
Yeah.
it's not CGI.
But it would. It's it. The impact's not the same because
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was nothing like it before it came
Yeah,
out. The
no,
first
no, no. You're right. In the impact wouldn't be the same as what we experienced, but I think it would give people a new appreciation for the movie. And it's the same thing with Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah,
I used to say Harrison Ford has never made a bad movie. Well, he's made a couple. You know, Raiders
yeah,
of the
the
Lost
latest
Ark,
ones.
the first Indiana Jones flick, Raiders of the Lost Ark was fabulous. One of my top five movies.
The second one
The
sucked.
second one was a pile of steam and manure. The third one with Sean Connery
Was good.
was on par with number one. It was real good. After that, eh,
Yeah,
it's time to let that franchise go.
they overdid it.
Jim Dockrell, can they stop making they can stop making Fast and Furious movies anytime too. What are they up
Yeah.
to? 10? Yeah. Something like that. Never saw one of them. Mm.
So, um, anything else? I'm kind of losing the bat. Like
Okay,
I
yeah,
woke
that's
up so
fine. That's
early.
fine. Yeah, I've got an early appointment tomorrow. We should go ahead and wrap up. Anyway, my attitude on reboot, be very, 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 very careful what movie you choose to reboot, and be very, very careful how you do it. Treat the old classics with respect. They're classics for a reason.
And whatever you do, if you do reboot them, reimagine them so that they are woke.
Oh yeah, that's gonna help you.
It's just that's another factor that we didn't touch on, but
And I won't
that's
touch on it simply because that's what I mean. I think that's all encompassing when I say have respect for those old classics because they're classics for a reason.
well, don't you want Rambo
I don't
in a
want to see the
nice?
Mona Lisa with a mustache, okay? If you have a copy of the Mona Lisa hanging on your wall and you want to put a mustache on it, be my guest. But it's not the Mona Lisa anymore.
They used to do that kind of thing, the woke stuff, even back in the day in comic books because they were very forward looking and such. So they had little bits in comic books, and you could tell when you're reading them and say, "Yeah, no, I don't believe that." Like I would do that and say, "Oh, yeah, that you're saying, you guys are what is
Well,
you know."
they did it on Saturday morning cartoons too. I don't know if you noticed it. You grew up with the G.I. Joe cartoons, right? Did you ever notice that every time one of the enemy planes got shot down, the pilot of that plane bailed out?
Yeah,
Every time. If the plane got hit, the pilot ejected.
yeah, they couldn't show actual
Hmm.
death.
They made it a point to draw
Hold on,
attention to that.
hold on, some crazy noise outside. Hold
Well, that's interesting. Um, at the theater was the best. Even a 50-inch screen doesn't do Star. I see you corrected yourself. Star Wars justice. It was made for the big screen. Absolutely, absolutely. Just something about seeing those on that huge screen. You felt like you were surrounded almost, and you had to keep your head on a swivel because you never knew where to look. You know, heck yeah.
on. Oh, here's
And if
the siren. Sorry.
it's all right. I mean, life is what happens while you're busy making other plans.
It sounded like it was right outside my house, but it wasn't.
Oh, okay. Well, we need to go ahead and land the plane because it looks like you're losing the battle.
I am, dude. I woke up very, very early.
Yep.
Um, all right. So we go live every Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast time, and we have a website, trampledunderfootpodcast.com. You can catch our past episodes there. We also have a site on Facebook called Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook, and we at times post a clip or image, some sort of clipping of the things we talk about. Maybe in this case, no. Maybe yes, there could be something, but be sure to look at that for curiosities. And we're also sponsored by.
Harneal Media, your web solution. Just you and me talking here. And I've been talking about this for a couple of years now. And some of you had taken advantage of it, some of you have not. It's you. You're the ones that I'm talking about. You know who you are. Lean in close, just you and me. Lean forward a little bit more. There we go, right there. You're thinking about a website. You don't know it yet, but you're thinking about a website and you're wondering how you're going to get your products or services out there in front of the world. Yeah, you can go through some of these third party sites. They're going to charge you a 30% commission. But why would you want to do that? Get a hold of Steve over there at Harneal Media and cut out the middleman entirely. Set up your own web store, offer your products, offer your services. Steve can help you get that done. He can help you with merch. He can help you hook you up with a print on demand company. They handle the inventory, they handle all the shipping, they handle all the taxing and all that other good stuff. All you do is watch the orders come in, design the products, and get them up on your web store. That's Harneal Media, HARNEAL media.com, sponsor of TrampledUnderfootPodcast.com.
All right. Well, guys, we hope you enjoyed yourselves. We'll catch you guys next Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific. That's right. I haven't completely lost it.
Yeah.
And be safe. Enjoy the things that you do. See you.
Peace. Go carve a pair of blue jeans.